Hi, I'm Matt Pierce, host of The Forge. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a great show. We've got an interview with Nancy Duarte. If you haven't seen Nancy's stuff before, it's awesome. So we're excited for that. We've also got some things. We're going to end up the season, which means we're taking a break for the summer, and we'll be back. And you're on with The Forge. All right, a couple things before we jump into our interview with Nancy. As a reminder, you can always send us feedback at theforge@techsmith.com, or you can follow us on Twitter. Use the hashtag TSCForge. If you want to make sure you get a hold of us, put @TechSmith in there as well. Now, as you watch through Nancy's interview, what I want you to think about is, what are some of the things that you could do to make your presentations resonate? And if you send us an email afterwards, with your best thing that you learned from Nancy's interview, you might just be a lucky winner of one of her books. So I'll talk more about it after the interview, but let's go into that right now and jump into the good stuff, and we'll be right back after the interview. Hi, I'm so excited to talk with our guest today. Today's guest is Nancy Duarte. Nancy has written some fantastic books, has given a fantastic TED Talk that if you haven't seen, you need to go out and see it, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that today. But I'll let her do most of the introduction for herself because she's just great, and we want you to know who she is and all the things that she has to offer. But also, look at the links that we're going to provide here below the post. So Nancy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So Nancy, for those who have not met you yet or haven't had a chance to get familiar with your work, give us a little bit about your background and who you are.
So I my husband started my firm in 1988. I joined in 1990. So we've been writing and producing presentations for some of the most fantastic people in the world. And I've been doing it for a really long time. And 2008, Gar Reynolds, who is out in Japan, he has presentations then, encouraged me to write a book. And in 2008, I wrote a book. 2010, I wrote my second book. And 2012, I wrote my third book. So I guess I'm an author, CEO. We have about, I think we're at 120 people now here in the shop. And we just moved last week into a new bigger, lovely space. And we just have a grand time writing and producing presentations.
It looks very cool back there, and I think that's one of the things. One of the reasons I want to talk to you is this idea of how do you get to good presentations, and obviously for a lot of people our customers they're using tools to make hopefully more visual presentations, but they might be making videos. So, advice time. Where do you start to make a really good presentation?
Well, I think people should step away from their natural environment, their normal work environment, because people don't realize that creating a presentation is a creative process. So by kind of stepping away from your regular environment, the first thing you need to do is obsess over who you're going to be talking to. Think about, like, what's a day in their life like? What's a walk in their shoes look like? What keeps them up at night? What are the pressures in their life? Where do they hang out online? What's going on at their company? And really spend some time thinking about who they are, because if you're presenting to someone, the odds are really high you're asking them to do something. If you're asking them to do something, or there's some sort of call to action for them to do, you're asking them to make some kind of a sacrifice or a risk. And they're going to have roadblocks. They're not going to want to do those things for you. So you got to think about, like, who am I talking to? Why should they care? And then you got to think about, how are they going to resist? And you got to think about all that stuff. And so leave your normal environment and start this creative process where you start to brainstorm ideas around who they are. Then you brainstorm, where am I taking them? Where do I want them to be when they leave the room? What do I want them to believe? How do I want them to behave? And you work through all of that. I use sticky notes. I stick them up on my wall, and I arrange and rearrange. I call people in. What do you think? Here's who I'm talking to. Here's what I'm trying to say. Oh, don't say that. Don't say that. Say this, say that. You forgot this or that, right? And so there's a whole lot of creative process that should happen long before you open up presentation software. So that's, I guess, my answer to your super simple question. It sounds complex, but it's really easy.
Well, no, it sounds like what you're really talking about is focusing on the thing that matters, which is the audience.
Yes.
And as I've gone through your book Resonate, and I've looked at some of you write for the Harvard Business Review some articles, and this idea that you are not the hero.
Yeah.
It's the audience. And
Right.
so in terms of that, maybe explain a little bit more what that means to you, that as the presenter, you are really the mentor, not the hero.
Yeah, I spent a couple years studying story in preparation to write Resonate because I knew there was a gap between when people were telling a story and when people were presenting. And I'm like, why is it so terrible when they're a presenter, but they could be around their dinner table and they're actually charming and funny? And the difference is that we don't use story principles to build our presentation. So when I was studying story, I got to where I wanted to study about the archetypes, especially the Jungian archetypes. And I assumed that the presenter was the hero because they're kind of the central figure. They're talking a lot, and usually in myths and movies, whoever's the central figure a lot of times is the hero. And I realized pretty quickly that the presenter is not the hero, that the presenter is the mentor. Because when you're presenting, you're just an hour in these people's lives. You're not the focus of their whole life. You're just an hour. You're a moment in their life. And the mentor comes alongside someone in their life and does one of three things. They bring a magical gift, a special tool, or they help this hero get unstuck. And that's what every presentation should do. The presenter is actually saying, hey, I'm going to arm you to make your life more successful in life's journeys. And so often, we sit through tons of presentations and never feel unstuck. And, in fact, we feel stuck, or we, never feel we got a special gift or a magical tool. So I think changing your mindset to realize, wait a minute, I'm not the star of the show. So many people are like, hi, I'm here and I'm going to save you from being stupid, or whatever presenter stance is, to one of, wait, I'm humbled by you. If I don't present well, my hero, my ideas may die. I really care about you enough to work hard at making sure you understand my ideas. So it kind of changes the stance too of the presenter by realizing what their role is with the audience.
Well, that's fantastic. So I feel like I've got two nuggets so far. I've actually got to do this for an upcoming conference, put together my presentation. So I've got this audience analysis, essentially. I've got this change of mindset for myself, that I'm the hero. But you also, in your book, Resonate, and this is what I felt like was really the big takeaway for me from your TED Talk, was this idea of what you call a spark line. And it's kind of the structure that the presentation flows through. I'd love to have you give us a brief description of what that is, and then maybe we can talk about a little bit how you can actually use it, because I think that's the piece I've struggled with, is like, I know the concept, I've explained it to a lot of people. In fact, most of the people around here that I've run into now, they're tired of me showing them on their whiteboards, look at this shape and what it can do. But I'm not sure I know, I'm making that jump from, I get this idea, it seems sound, it seems like it could be really powerful, to how do I do that?
Yeah, that's funny. I actually had a fan tattooed it really big across his arm. It's so funny. Well, thank goodness you told me you were going to ask this question, because I printed it out. I'll show everybody what that shape is. I don't know if people can see it
Go
here.
up just a little bit. There you go. Great.
But there's the basic shape. And what happened was, I was studying story like mad, like I mentioned. And I kept thinking, if story has an arc, it has a shapeliness to it. If great communicators talked to a shape, what shape have they been using? And so I actually made this discovery that all the way back to Aristotle, the greatest communicators use this. There is a tension and release of story. Story, you build and build and build, and there's this tension, and then it releases, and there's tension and release, and it kind of, great presenters use this as a framework to convey their ideas. And as you push and pull and push and pull, it pushes them forward, and it actually propels your idea forward in their minds. And so what it is basically, as a structural device, is where you contrast the gap between what is and what could be. And then you move back to what is, what could be. So you establish, here's what is, here's what's going on, here's what we all believe is true. And then you introduce your idea into this moment of where everyone's kind of like, yeah, that is what is true. And you're introducing this new idea, and it creates like this inciting incident in the movies where suddenly the hero's world is out of balance. They're like, oh my gosh, I have to contend with this new concept you're putting on the table. And then as you move back and forth between what is, what could be, kind of as a structural device, what happens is they start to see the gap, and they start to realize, wow, staying where I am is now commonplace or status quo, or staying where I am isn't going to be good for the company anymore, when they see it contrasted with how glorious the future would be if you adopt the idea. So it is this tension and release that happens, and it actually pushes and pulls them toward the direction you want them to go. So once I had the shape I started to use it as an analysis tool, creating a sparkline. The word sparkline is actually coined by Edward Tufte as a data device. So the actual name of this tool is a persuasive story structure that I plot. I actually plot it into the shape of a sparkline. So when you look at the persuasive story structure of someone like Martin Luther King, I've plotted it into a sparkline, and you can see the back and forth motion of the gap between what is and what could be. So I analyzed a lot of great people in the book, and I can tell you really liked kind of the analysis of it when you can actually see it, see the shape of their talk mapped out. Because this version, I have it perfectly, like almost like an audio frequency, but when the great communicators use it, the frequency is looser and tighter, and but it's still there and moves back and forth.
So Nancy, the question then becomes, okay, so obviously there's some study that goes into this. It's not just like, hey, I'm going to be a great communicator today because I did this process.
Okay, you could if you tried real hard.
Sure, but I think, so what are the steps that you think take someone down that path to help them? I haven't studied the classic storytelling like maybe I should have, and but the shape resonates with me.
Yeah.
But I think this is one of the questions I sent over to you was, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech and Steve Jobs' the first iPhone launch, are pretty revolutionary, like amazing, like moments in history of things that are changing, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I have had one of those moments yet where I'm going to launch the new iPhone or give this amazing speech to for more common ideas, or like I'm getting this presentation, so does it still apply? And if so, what do you do to get it there? I mean, because I want to be a great communicator.
I get this a lot. It's like, well, that's great that you studied these great communicators. Can you study an average one? I'm like, well, who wants to be a student of average communication? Or
right.
What about us normal people? And I think what people lose sight of is that Steve Jobs was just a college dropout. Martin Luther King, just a preacher. You look at Evita Peron, she was just an orphan. Nobody's really qualified. But my dirty secret, I got a C- in speech communications and a D in English in college. So I just wrote a book about speech communications. So I'm not qualified, right? So I'm not qualified to be the communicator I am, but I've worked really hard at it. And if you look at, people can have a really kind of an average idea, communicate it well, and it gets traction. Other people can have an awesome idea, but it stays trapped in them forever because they've never chosen to communicate it well. So it depends on how you consider normal. Would your own firm love to quintuple their sales? Would they love, movements happen in different varieties of scale. But I think if you love what you do, you love who you work for, you love what you believe, maybe everyone has something inside of them that may motivate them enough to work on their communication skills. It could be a belief system that you have or a product that you're trying to sell. It doesn't really matter. But you need something that you care enough about to commit to becoming a really good communicator, and those are the ones that change the world. But changing the world sounds so lofty. You have a world there you're trying to change.
Yep.
A little bit. They're little small incremental changes. So I think it takes discipline. I think it takes a commitment to doing this as a creative process, and then on the end, so you've got the creative process to create it, and then you've got to have the discipline, almost a militant discipline, to rehearse it so that it's done well. Now, not everything has to be done that way. If you're headed into a project update meeting right after this, you're going to sit around and throw around printouts of PowerPoint. That's different than something that's a really important sales call, or if you get asked to do a TED Talk, or if you get an audience where it's really high stakes, could be in front of the board. You could be petitioning to get your budget expanded, whatever it is. Those are high stakes moments, and they need to be treated as such.
Well, I can't help but notice that even in this conversation, right, what we've gone through is like, well, what's normal? What's that? You're nobody. And then we go into this, well, here's what you could be. And that pattern seems to apply in lots of places. And so
I guess I just do it subconsciously at this point.
Well, I appreciate that, though, because I think a lot of, the folks that I talk to is they do feel like they're average communicators, or maybe a little bit better than average, or maybe a little bit less. And I think that's really great advice, that if you want to be good at it, you have to put the time into making it good. So one of the other things I think is interesting here, though, is I think it was your other book, Slideology, which I have not read, so I'm going off of kind of their Amazon review here. But I did read the presentation Zen.
I'm going to send you my other book as a free gift for having me on the
well,
show.
thank you for that. Maybe what we'll do is we'll actually give that away to one of our audience members.
Oh, that'd be great.
I'll pick up my own copy because I do want to go through it. But the idea of visuals, though, are really important. I mean, we're a visual company. We think about this. But as someone who creates presentations, that's your specialty. What is the role of this? And especially as we look at kind of in context of what we just talked about, but you got to think about your audience, you've got to practice, you've got to think it as a serious creative endeavor. What role does visuals actually play in the overall emphasis and communicating of the message?
Yeah, I think people sometimes will go for the first most cliche kind of imagery, and it's another layer. So once you know what you're going to say, then there's other planning layer for the visuals, because visuals can add a lot of emotional appeal. They can make people feel like startled, like you can have these statistics that make people gasp. You could have images that make people laugh or cry, or it really adds this nice layer. So if you're not comfortable verbalizing emotional appeal, you can actually create it through the backdrop, the visuals that are supporting you. And you know, a picture really is worth 1,000 words. So if you're going to do something like announce a global partnership, please don't put a handshake in front of a globe. I mean, everyone uses the freaking handshake in front of the globe. Like, could we be more clever? Can you make that partnership sound more beautiful or nuanced? Like, is your partnership really like two peas in a pod, right? They're so alike, you just belong together. Or is it like salt and pepper? You're very different, but when you come together, you make this other thing more savory. Like, how could you describe your partnership without using a handshake in front of the globe? So because your competitors are going to use this dorky, they're going to use the most dorky idea, the first one that comes to them. So I think making a little bit of an investment, realizing it's this layered creative process, makes a really big difference. And there is a way to change words into pictures and try to make it so that you're not reading your slides and doing those kinds of things. But it's definitely another creative process that you could use just at the right moment. Like the picture at the right moment could become the thing that people never forget about your talk. So timing it and using pictures well is a really beautiful thing.
And probably at the wrong moment, it just goes unnoticed and not cared about, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So I guess as we get towards wrapping up here, is there any other advice as you have this chance to speak to someone, and if somebody come to you and say, Nancy, I need your help. I just need some advice to get going. Obviously we've talked about different pieces of it, but anything else you'd want to say to someone to help them just to do a great job? Because honestly, I think part of this, my selfish motivation here is I don't want to sit through bad presentations. Right? I want to be engaged, and I want to feel connected. I want to have those aha moments with people. So is there anything else that you would want to tell people about, hey, if you can go down this path, this is going to make a difference?
Well, it's funny because in a way, I think you just answered the question, because you're like, when I sit in a presentation, I want to learn, I want to be engaged, I want to, right? You want to learn, you want to be challenged, you want to have new insights. You're describing all of the things that a mentor is supposed to bring to the hero, right? You're describing magical gifts, special tool, you want to get unstuck. And so I do think that taking the time, again, kind of to obsess over the audience and think about that, like every time, if you even look at TED Talks, every time one's given, the audience is like, oh my God, I'm learning. You can actually hear the sucking sound of them learning new things. And so make it interesting. Like, put in things about a moment in history where they're like, I never knew that about, this particular, person, and this story is a metaphor now for my life or for your concepts. And so I think that people really love to learn. They want to enjoy it. So make it funny, make it matter, have the right amount of analytical and emotional appeal, and just have fun doing it. Just have a good time doing it. People can tell if you're passionate, and passion's contagious.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Before we wrap up, though, you've got lots of great information out there. Where would you recommend someone wants to go find out more about what you're doing, the things that we've talked about today? We'll put links on our blog, but where would you have them go?
Thanks so much. So Duarte.com is a great place. We also have @Duarte at Twitter, and then we have @Nancy Duarte, and we have a Facebook page under Duarte Inc. So that's where you can go.
And for anyone else, we'll put the link to the TED Talk, and go check out the Harvard Business Review. I know I've appreciated seeing a couple things come through there, and there's a couple I know I look at and say, that supports exactly what I've been saying, the squint test and all sorts of things. So thank you so much, Nancy, for your time today.
Thank you.
And,
thanks for having me.
We're going to move on to our next segment, and we'll be back in just a minute. All right, everybody, welcome back. And thanks again to Nancy Duarte. She's a fantastic guest and has so many great ideas. Now, she mentioned she's going to send a book, and we're going to be giving that away. We're actually going to give away a copy of Slideology and a copy of Resonate. How you can win that is send us an email and answer the question, what was your biggest takeaway from the interview with Nancy? And we'll choose randomly from that group. Probably share some of those out on the blog, but 2 people will win a book. So now, this is the end of the season for us. Normally we take a break. Summer we revamp things. If we're talking what is, we see the Forge as you see this backdrop, you see what we've been doing with our show. But if you think ahead, what could be, we want to know what you think it should be. We want to know what kind of things you'd like us to do. What would you like to hear about, learn about? Who would you like us to talk to? Please send us an email at theforge@techsmith.com. Now, if you send us in a great comment, we'll probably do some random selection because we have a limited amount of these, but we do have awesome Forge t-shirts. You want one of these bad boys? Make a video. Send us a screencast. Tell us what you think we should do with the Forge. Now, if you just send an email, because frankly, maybe typing a 1-line sentence might be easier, you still might win some cool sticker or some other random swag that we've got. I've got some old Forge shirts too that we might just give away. Maybe, right? So, send us that. We want to know what you think that we should do starting next September. Should we go to bi-weekly, so every other week? Should we do shorter shows, longer shows? Sky's the limit. We want to know. We'll keep that open for about a month. We'll notify the winners via email, so make sure you give us your information as well. Helps if you give us an address that we can ship this stuff to, and saves me a little back and forth. Now, as we wrap up here, this is the end of season 3. It's been 3 great years, and we've had some fantastic guests. So many that we can't even name them all right now. It'd be a very long list, but I want to thank each and every one of them for taking some time out of their busy schedules to talk with us and to share their information with you. In addition, I want to make sure I thank Mike Grzinski and Kyle Wilson. They've been running behind the scenes. We also want to thank Kelly Rush, who has moved on to bigger and better things here at TechSmith, so he's not technically helping out on the Forge right now, but we miss him and wish him luck in the role that he's filling. We also want to thank Jesse LaHaye, Daniel Foster, Caitlin Flannery, and Chelsea Beck for all working behind the scenes to either manage the floor, work on social media, the chat, all those great things, helping us with content and so forth. I also want to thank all the TechSmith staff for making this possible. That includes our president, Bill Hamilton, as he has not stopped us from doing it quite yet. And also we want to, again, thank all of our amazing guests for the wonderful information they provide. We couldn't do it without them. And last but not least, you, the viewer. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll be back in September. We'll probably do a couple small things over the summer, but you can count on a regular show once again in September. We'll see you then on The Forge. Thanks a lot.